Angela Carter provides us with a more overtly feminist take on the story of Bluebeard. I discuss this and more on today's episode. Welcome back to Around the Weird, a booktube channel where I talk about all the unusual and out of the ordinary literature that I've found in my travels. Today it is Short Story Tuesday, so I wanted to talk about some interesting short form literature that I have found. And it is also Spooktober for the last couple days here. So I wanted to get out one more spooky short story before I go back to talking about normal short stories, or before I go back to talking about unusual ones that maybe aren't Halloween themed, although I might come across a few Halloween themed short stories as we go on through the year, but I won't be seeking them out like I'm doing now. And today's short story is all about a marquis and a honeymoon that does not go as planned. I am referring to The Bloody Chamber by Angela Carter, which was published in 1979. For those who don't know, Angela Carter was an English author who lived in the mid-1900s. She wrote quite a bit, translation, short form literature, short stories, novels, anthologies, and other works, including nonfiction. And a lot of her work focused on women, also sort of mythology, the magical kind of things like that. She was somewhat well regarded for her work. I think she even won an award for this short story collection, which this short story, The Bloody Chamber, comes from a major book called The Bloody Chamber and Other Stories. Some of which have been adapted into other media. It's the first time I've read Angela Carter, but I'm very happy that I was able to find her work, especially because I think the other things I've read for the month of October have been by men. Haven't found a lot of literature, at least spooky literature, by women, but I'm very happy to have at least found this. So, but I'm also happy because this was pretty good. I'm very thrilled to have read something like this. And so, without further ado, let's talk about The Bloody Chamber. I will do a summary, a little bit of analysis, and we will move on from there. So The Bloody Chamber focuses on an unnamed narrator. She is what appears to be a teenage girl. She says she's 17, I think written at a time when it was normal for, marquis, like very wealthy men to marry such young women. And this young girl is arranged to marry this French marquis. She has her doubts, as does her mother. Her mother specifically asks, "Do you love him?" And she's like, "I know I want to marry him," which is not an answer to that question. But she has to get married eventually, and it might as well be to this wealthy man who can provide for her. And she knows that she's going to have sex on her wedding day, but the sex has been delayed until they get back to the castle that the Marquis runs, because he wants to have sex in the ancestral bridal bed. And they go back. The husband is a bit busy with his other work and whatnot, focusing more on that, when he does focus on the woman and tries to have sex with her, he finds out that the narrator, this young girl, is a virgin, and she bleeds a little bit. And so he's like, "Oh, well, we'll hold off for having sex for now. I can't wait to partake pretty soon," which is weird. But he seems alarmed by it, like very interested in kind of fetishizing the fact that she's a virgin, but also kind of not wanting to be with her, possibly because she was bleeding, and any signs of femininity doesn't appeal to this man, as we find out later. And she's hoping to finally just have sex and get it over with. But the Marquis is called away, which he says he has to go to New York, and the narrator is unhappy because it's her honeymoon after all. And the Marquis responds by giving her a set of keys and says she can visit any room in the house, but she can't visit one of the room that goes to a specific key because it's too scary in there. There's a bunch of spider webs, and he just doesn't want her to deal with that. Which, of course, if you tell someone not to go visit somewhere, especially a teenager, they are likely to go and visit that area. And the narrator snoops around, reading some of the files that the Marquis has kept private, and not really learning too much except about information about previous wives, which the Marquis seems to have loved. And then she eventually decides to take the key and go visit visit the room that the Marquis said not to visit. And when she opens the door, she discovers a lot of torture devices. But then she shines a light in a certain direction and sees dead bodies as well as a lot of blood. This prompts her to drop a key in the room, which it gets bloody. And when she gets back, she tells one of the piano cleaners, who she's developing a little bit of a friendship with, about or piano tuners about this Marquis, and he wants to help, but he can't really do anything. And she also finds that she can't clean the key; it just seems to make it messier and messier. And the Marquis comes home sooner rather than later, and demands to see the keys. And it's at this point that the narrator realizes that this has all been a setup, basically a way to test the narrator, the Marquis testing her, and he plans to kill her if she actually did some snooping. Which he finds out that she did some snooping, and he's like, "I'm gonna chop your head off now. I'm gonna make you a martyr on our wedding night." And he does indeed try to kill her. He plans his execution, but her mother, who she was talking to earlier, shows up at the last minute and defends her daughter. And the Marquis tries to attack, but the mother just pulls out a gun and shoots the Marquis dead. And from there, there's some gossiping, but the narrator notes that she knows what truly happened. They end up inheriting the estate and donating a lot of it to charity, and I think the narrator even marries the piano tuner that she had developed a friendship with. But she notes that there's still a little bit of shame from what happened in this entire scenario, and that's where the story ends there. In terms of analysis, there is a fair bit to talk about with the Bloody Chamber. The first thing worth noting is that it is an adaptation of Bluebeard, for those who don't know, and I'm not as familiar with this as other fairy tales, but Bluebeard is a French fairy tale about a wealthy sort of landowner like a Marquis who is known for having wives who die really soon. And this Marquis Bluebeard shows up to a home and is like, "I want to marry one of your daughters." And one of the daughters decides to do it just because she knows it'll bring a better life for them. And she ends up going through the same situation where she discovers a room full of dead bodies of past wives. And fortunately, she is saved by a heroic brother-in-law of some sort from one of her sisters. And then she ends up inheriting once Bluebeard is effectively punished, and things seem to work out for her. So this is really an adaptation of that, but there's a mixture of a lot more feminism in this story. It is a stronger feminist take, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a few moments. And then there's also a lot of gothic storytelling at here, which you probably saw a little bit in the original Bluebeard, but this is more heavy-handed, I would say. It really adds to the overall atmosphere of the story of being in a castle that is centuries old and also has a room with blood and dead bodies in it. I really have to applaud Angela Carter for managing to adapt this story. I've seen a lot of other fairy tale adaptations that have kind of stuck with the original story a little too much, but this one seems to adapt it fairly well. And I don't know if that's purely because of Angela Carter or if it's because Bluebeard was already sort of a story that you could adapt in such a way. Angela Carter says she wasn't really adapting a fairy tale, but merely like sort of elaborating on the adult elements of the story, the feminist elements of the story. But it's still important to note the inspiration here. It's also worth talking about the narrator's innocence in this story. After all, like, the narrator's only a young girl. She's 17, which nobody should really be getting married at 17 years old. That's far too young. And you're still growing. You're still learning about the world. So the narrator isn't really in a position to be getting married. And there's this whole expectation that she'll have sex with this man and provide her wifely duties, and there's estate management. There's the desire for this man to have an heir. So there's a lot expected of this young girl, that she's only seen so much of the world. I don't think she's ready to do what this man is expecting of her. And you even see that through her eyes. Like, she yearns for a life with her mother, very unhappy that she's had to sort of give up that life to be with this man. And in addition to that, we see her cry for her mother when she calls him up later in the story. She's like, "Mom, I need your help," and the mother eventually comes, and she has a sense of telepathy where she's like, "My daughter needs me," but there's very, very clear representation of that innocence, which Carter does particularly well here. And then you see this comparison to the naive, very innocent narrator with that of the manipulative marquis, and just awful jerk in general, teasing her and not choosing not to spend time with her on their wedding night, and then giving her the keys and saying, "Here you go, don't check out this room," though, even though he knows she's going to do that. The narrator realizes that later in the story when he's about to punish her. She's like, "Oh, this was all a setup on his part because he wanted to probably kill another wife." This gives him room to do so now because ultimately he found out. So kind of offering an insight onto how evil this man is. I think they liken it to Pandora's box. You give this person a box, tell them not to open it, they're going to want to open it. But there's also a reference to Eve from the story of Adam and Eve, how Eve was blamed for eating the forbidden fruit, but there's nothing wrong with eating that fruit and wanting to gain more knowledge, especially of the circumstances that you're in. And a lot of people say there's a sense of malice, but again, it's just the narrator's innocence in this story, I think. So Angela Carter does a really good job, and I also like the allusions that she's making to other mythological kind of stories or other biblical stories even. The last thing worth noting in this story is the feminist elements of the story. I think Angela Carter has said herself, or did say herself, that she was attempting to highlight the feminist elements of the original Bluebeard story and not simply retelling a fairy tale straightforward. She wanted to sort of highlight what was maybe already there and elaborate on it. And you see how she's highlighting how powerful men use and harm women. With the marquis in the story using the narrator for sex, using her to try to get an heir, and also harming or attempting to harm the narrator because of the things she found out. It's clear that Carter's just showing that sometimes men, enact violence upon women, either to feel more powerful or as a simple game on their part. The marquis views the narrator as a prize or a curiosity, like, "Ooh, look at this virgin. Isn't she amazing? Let me fetishize her." Or just a prize, like, "This beautiful woman is now my wife. I get to claim her. She's a trophy for all I've done in life." Very sinister element to it. And he's like, "Oh, now I get to potentially have a child. Someone gets to bear me a child so that I can have an heir." And so the marquis doesn't see this young girl as anything other than a sex object, if that, maybe a conversation piece to talk to about various things are happening if he wants to make her feel less than too, because he'll probably talk down to her. But also when he's talking with his buddies, he'll be like, look at this beautiful woman I married, she's just there, she's running the estate and whatnot. But it's also worth noting that like there is some like feminist solidarity on the narrator's part, especially when she opens the door and sees the dead bodies and the blood. She's like, oh no, these poor women. She feels some solidarity with the women. Allow me to read you an interesting quote from this. I closed the lid of her coffin very gently and burst into a tumult of sobbing that contained both pity for his other victims and also a dreadful anguish to know I too was one of them. Which is a very simple quote there, but it pretty much gets at the underlying sort of message that I think Angela Carter is trying to get at here, that all women are sort of united in how the world treats them and how and expectations that are placed upon them, because like, you know, these women died, but that doesn't mean that like any one woman is exempt from that treatment. Like some women might be like better viewed by men at times, but they'll still be exploited and possibly killed. And so there's a sense of understanding, you know, and feeling sad for these women who have been sort of treated horribly, because you know that could one day happen to you. What's also interesting is that in the original Bluebeard story, the woman in that story is saved by her heroic brother-in-law, but in this story she's saved by her mother. Like her mother senses a need for her daughter's need for her, and she like rides across the countryside to get to the castle in time and is able to save the daughter from execution. That's interesting because, again, the mother, a woman, is saving a woman rather than the man saving a damsel in distress. But I think that might also get at something sort of essential about the wedding night and all of that, about how you give away your daughter on the wedding night, but you might not be fully ready for that. And the horrifying sort of scary part about having to have sex on your wedding night and jumping into a whole new life and whatnot. And so maybe this is the mother trying to do for her daughter what maybe her mother couldn't have done for her, a sort of matriarchal sense of love or something like that. I do think that's a little bit of what Angela Carter is trying to get at here. It's also important to consider class in this story as well. Not exactly a sort of feminist element, but it does seem like class plays a big role, especially when you have these sadistic landowners who are enacting violence towards women, and there's very little repercussions for them because, you know, there might be a sense like, oh, this man is going through his wives pretty quickly, something is happening there, but you can't really do anything about it because these upper class people have all the power. They control it. I think there's a sense on the narrator's part in the story that she can't really go to the police because the castle has been here a while, so the police might look the other way or actively allow this man to kill anyone who speaks out, because again, he has the power in the area. So I get the sense that the sexism and the classism is kind of a shared element there. Anyway, those are my thoughts on The Bloody Chamber by Angela Carter. A pretty good short story. Definitely a more fascinating one for Spooktober. It might not be like strictly scary, I think, but there is a whole subgenre of like feminist horror where you see the horrible things that men do to women, and that's scary in and of itself. There's a couple of other movies out there that exist pretty similarly to that. One of them being Men, which was a movie that came out a couple of years ago, at least at the time that I'm talking about this. I haven't seen it, but I know its entire thing is about that sort of common theme there. I definitely recommend that you go out and check out this short story. I'll put a link to it in the description. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Would love to hear from you and possibly have a conversation about this. Otherwise, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so that more people can find out about this short story or this author if they don't already know. And until then, I wish you the best of luck in your weird and Bluebeard adapting travels. Farewell.